The attending physician mocked my diagnosis in front of the entire team, called me a resident with delusions of grandeur. Today, he won't even sit in the same room as me. But before I tell you about that moment when he had to publicly admit he was wrong, let me take you back to the beginning, to the day that changed everything, to the day I learned that being right sometimes costs you everything before it gives you anything. My name is Dr. Ethan Rivers. I'm 29 years old, and this is my story. I'm a third-year resident at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston, one of the top teaching hospitals in the country. The kind of place where you either become an exceptional doctor or get crushed trying. I've always been detail-oriented. Some call it obsessive. My ex-girlfriend called it exhausting. My med school professors called it promising. I call it survival, because in medicine, the details you miss can kill someone. It was a Tuesday morning in October. Cold rain hitting the windows of the residence lounge. I was on my second coffee of the day, reviewing patient charts before morning rounds. That's when I first saw Michael Chen's file. 52 years old. Presented to the ER the previous night with mild fatigue and occasional shortness of breath. Initial workup showed slightly elevated creatinine levels. Nothing alarming. The ER doc sent him home with instructions to follow up with his primary care physician. But something bothered me about the chart. I pulled up his imaging. Chest x-ray showed some subtle haziness in both lung fields. Easy to miss if you weren't looking carefully. Most people wouldn't even notice it. But I did. I cross-referenced his labs. The creatinine elevation was mild, but it was there. And combined with the lung findings and his symptoms, my brain started connecting dots. Hey, you coming around? My co-resident Jake appeared at my shoulder. Collins is already in a mood. Don't give him another reason. Dr. Marcus Collins, 58 years old, attending physician, 25 years of experience, and an ego the size of Massachusetts itself. He made it very clear from day one that residents were there to learn, not to think. Especially not to think they knew better than him. Yeah, I'm coming. But Jake, look at this case. I showed him Michael Chen's chart. The x-ray, the labs. Jake squinted at the screen. Looks like mild fatigue, probably dehydration. What? Look at the lung fields and the kidney function. What if it's not two separate issues? Ethan, don't overthink this. It's probably nothing, but I couldn't let it go. During morning rounds, our team gathered outside Michael Chen's room. He'd been readmitted overnight when his symptoms worsened. Dr. Collins held the chart, reviewing it with theatrical boredom. 52-year-old male. Fatigue, shortness of breath, mild kidney dysfunction. Thoughts? The other residents offered standard suggestions. Dehydration, mild infection, stress. I raised my hand. Dr. Collins, I think we should consider an autoimmune process. He looked at me over his reading glasses. Autoimmune? Based on what, Dr. Rivers? The combination of pulmonary and renal involvement, the timeline of symptom progression, the specific pattern on the chest x-ray. I think we should test for anti-GBM antibodies. The team went silent. Dr. Collins closed the chart slowly. Anti-GBM antibodies. You think this patient has Goodpasture syndrome? Yes, sir. The clinical presentation fits. It's rare, but it's rare because it's rare, Dr. Rivers. His voice dripped with condescension. Not every patient with a cough and tired kidneys has an exotic disease. But the imaging shows mild pulmonary congestion, probably from fluid overload. This is a teaching hospital, not a television drama. We don't diagnose zebras when we hear hoofbeats. A few residents chuckled nervously. With respect, Dr. Collins, if we don't at least test Dr. Rivers. He stepped closer. Do you know how many patients I've treated in 25 years? No, sir. Thousands. And do you know how many times I've seen Goodpasture syndrome? No, sir. Once. One time. In a quarter century. And you, in your infinite wisdom after 3 years of residency, think you've spotted the second case. More laughter from the team. Louder this time. You're not Dr. House. This isn't a medical mystery. It's a middle-aged man who needs hydration and rest. He handed the chart to another resident. Dr. Martinez, continue with standard supportive care. For fluids, monitor kidney function, chest PT if needed. Yes, Dr. Collins. Dr. Collins turned back to me. Dr. Rivers, I appreciate enthusiasm, but don't confuse enthusiasm with competence. You have delusions of grandeur. Focus on learning basic medicine before you try to reinvent it. The team moved to the next patient. I stood there, humiliated, my face burning. But wait, because what nobody knew, what Dr. Collins didn't know, was what I'd done the night before. I couldn't sleep. Michael Chin's case kept playing in my mind like a song stuck on repeat. So at 2 a.m., I drove back to the hospital. I pulled his chart again, and using my resident privileges, I ordered the anti-GBM antibody test myself. It was technically within my scope, but it was also going behind Dr. Collins's back. I knew it was risky. If I was wrong, I'd look like an insubordinate resident wasting hospital resources. But if I was right, I submitted the order and waited. The next 2 days were torture. Dr. Collins made sure everyone knew about the resident who thinks he's smarter than his attending. He made jokes during rounds. Called me Dr. House every time he saw me. Other residents avoided me. Nobody wants to be associated with the guy who challenged the attending and got humiliated. Jake pulled me aside. Dude, you need to let this go. Collins is never going to forget this. I know. So why are you still pushing? Because what if I'm right, Jake? What if this patient dies because nobody listened? And what if you're wrong? Your career here is over. He wasn't exaggerating. Residency is hierarchical. You don't challenge attendings and survive. But I couldn't let it go. On Thursday afternoon, I was in the residence lounge when my pager went off. Lab results, stat. My heart started racing. I logged into the system, pulled up Michael Chin's labs. Anti-GBM antibodies, positive. Creatinine rising. 2.8 was 1.42 days ago. Chest X-ray follow-up. Bilateral infiltrates worsening. I printed everything. My hands were shaking. Michael Chun had good pasture syndrome, and it was progressing rapidly. I actually ran through the hospital corridors to find Dr. Collins. He was in his office, reviewing papers. I knocked. Didn't wait for permission. Burst in. Dr. Collins, you need to see this. Dr. Rivers, I'm busy. Michael Chun. The anti-GBM antibodies came back positive. He looked up. What antibodies? I ordered the test 2 nights ago. He has good pasture syndrome, and he's getting worse. His creatinine is up to 2.8. The infiltrates are spreading. Dr. Collins stood up slowly, took the papers from my hand. Read them. His face went pale. You ordered this test without my approval. Yes, sir. That's insubordination. Yes, sir. But the patient needs plasmapheresis and immunosuppression immediately. If we don't start treatment now, he could go into renal failure. Dr. Collins stared at the labs for what felt like an eternity. Then he picked up his phone. Get me ICU. I need a bed immediately. And call nephrology for an urgent consult. We have a confirmed good pasture case. He hung up, looked at me. Transfer him to ICU. Start pulse methylprednisolone. Get the plasmapheresis team ready. Yes, sir. I turned to leave. Dr. Rivers. I stopped. You save his life. You know that, right? I didn't know what to say. If we continued with supportive care, he'd be on dialysis by next week. Or worse. I saw something that didn't fit. You saw something nobody else saw, including me. That was the closest thing to an apology I'd get from Dr. Collins that day. But it wasn't the end of the story. The next morning, the chief of medicine, Dr. Patricia Morrison, called an emergency department meeting. All attendings, all residents, standing room only in the conference room. Dr. Morrison stood at the front, Michael Chin's chart projected on the screen behind her. I want to discuss what happened with patient Michael Chun, she began. Third-year resident Dr. Ethan Rivers presented a differential diagnosis of good pasture syndrome during rounds. This diagnosis was dismissed by the attending physician. Everyone looked at Dr. Collins. His jaw was tight. Dr. Rivers, acting on clinical judgment, independently ordered confirmatory testing. The results came back positive. The patient is now receiving appropriate treatment in the ICU. Based on internal estimates, early intervention prevented a cascade of complications that would have cost the hospital over $44 million in extended ICU care, legal exposure, and reputational damage. She turned to face the room. If Dr. Rivers had not pursued his clinical instinct If he had simply followed orders and moved on, this patient would be in acute renal failure right now. Or dead. The room was dead silent. This case highlights two critical lessons. First, residents, you are not just here to follow orders. You're here to think, to question, to advocate for your patients. She looked directly at Dr. Collins. In attendings, your experience is invaluable, but it doesn't make you infallible. When a resident brings you a concern backed by clinical reasoning, it deserves consideration, not mockery. Dr. Collins shifted uncomfortably. Dr. Rivers demonstrated excellent clinical judgment and the courage to act on it despite facing dismissal and ridicule. That's the kind of physician we want in this program. She paused. Dr. Rivers, I'm recommending you for the chief resident position next year, and I'm personally nominating your case presentation for the hospital's Excellence in Clinical Medicine Award. I couldn't breathe. Chief resident, the most competitive position in the program. The meeting is adjourned. Dr. Collins, please see me in my office. As people filed out, several attendings stopped to shake my hand. Residents who'd ignored me for days suddenly wanted to congratulate me. Jake hugged me. Holy shit, dude. You did it. I didn't do anything except order a test. You stood up for your patient when nobody else would. That's everything. Over the next few weeks, everything changed. Dr. Collins avoided me. When we had to work together, he was coldly professional. No more jokes. No more Dr. House comments. Just silence. Other attendings started requesting me specifically for their teams. The resident who caught the good pasture case became my unofficial title. I was invited to present the case at grand rounds. 300 physicians in the auditorium. I walked them through my diagnostic reasoning, the subtle clues, the courage to order the test anyway. The applause lasted 2 minutes. A journal reached out about publishing the case. I wrote it up with Dr. Morrison as senior author. Dr. Collins declined to be included. And then came the letter. 6 months after the incident, I was invited to speak at the National Conference on Autoimmune Diseases in Chicago. The conference was massive. 3,000 attendees, top specialists from around the world. I was nervous but prepared. My presentation was scheduled for Saturday morning in the main ballroom. Friday night, during the welcome reception, I was grabbing coffee when someone tapped my shoulder. I turned around. It was an older woman, mid-70s, elegant, warm smile. Dr. Rivers? Yes. I'm Helen Shun, Michael's mother. My heart stopped. Oh my God. How is he? He's wonderful. Fully recovered. Back to work. Planning his daughter's wedding next spring. Tears formed in my eyes. I'm so glad. She took my hands. I needed to meet you in person. To thank you for saving my son's life. I just did my job. No. Her voice was firm. You did more than your job. They told me what happened. How you were ridiculed. How you stood your ground anyway. She squeezed my hands tighter. Michael told me something. He said he heard the residents laughing outside his room that day. He heard someone call you delusional. I nodded. And he said he was terrified, because if you were wrong, it meant he was really sick. But if you were right, it meant you were the only one who cared enough to find out. Mrs. Chun, you were right. And my son is alive because you wouldn't give up. Thank you, Dr. Rivers. Thank you for not giving up on him. We both cried there in the middle of the reception. The next morning, I gave my presentation. The ballroom was packed. My hands shook as I began. But once I started talking about the case, about the diagnostic process, about trusting clinical judgment, even when it's unpopular, the nervousness disappeared. I spoke for 45 minutes. When I finished, the standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. During the Q&A, a hand went up in the back. I called on him. The man stood. It took me a second to recognize him. Dr. Marcus Collins. My stomach dropped. Dr. Rivers. His voice carried through the microphone. Dr. Marcus Collins, Massachusetts General Hospital. The room went silent. Everyone knew this story. It had been written about in medical blogs, discussed in teaching conferences. I want to ask you something. I braced myself. How did you have the courage to order that test, knowing you'd be punished if you were wrong? I took a deep breath, because being wrong would have cost me my reputation, but being silent would have cost a patient his life. That wasn't a hard choice, Dr. Collins. He nodded slowly. Thank you for that answer. And thank you for teaching me something I should never have forgotten. He sat down. The room erupted in applause again. After the session, people swarmed me with questions. Business cards, collaboration offers. But I was looking for Dr. Collins. I found him in the hallway outside the ballroom, alone, staring out the window at the Chicago skyline. Dr. Collins. He turned. For the first time, he looked old, tired. That was a good presentation, Dr. Rivers. Thank you for coming. I almost didn't. But Dr. Morrison suggested I should see how the case I almost botched turned into a teaching moment. We stood in awkward silence. I was wrong, he said finally, about the diagnosis, about how I treated you, about everything. You made a clinical judgment based on experience. That's not wrong. I made an arrogant judgment based on ego. There's a difference. He turned to face me fully. I've been teaching for 25 years, and somewhere along the way, I stopped listening. I stopped being curious. I started believing my experience made me infallible. Dr. Collins, you reminded me why we became doctors. To serve patients, not our egos. He extended his hand. I'm sorry, Dr. Rivers, for everything. You're going to be an exceptional physician. We shook hands. Thank you, Dr. Collins. That means more than you know. He smiled sadly. I doubt we'll work together much. I'm retiring next year. Going to teach at a small community hospital. Get back to basics. That sounds good. It does. Anyway, congratulations on Chief Resident. You deserve it. He walked away down the hall. I never saw him again. Today, I'm Chief Resident at Massachusetts General, leading a team of 12 residents, teaching them the same lesson I learned that October morning. Trust your clinical judgment. Ask questions. Stand up for your patients even when it's uncomfortable. Because medicine isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being the most thorough, the most persistent, the most willing to admit you might be wrong while still pursuing what might be right. Michael Chen sends me a Christmas card every year. This year, there's a photo of him walking his daughter down the aisle. Thank you for giving me this moment, the card read. I keep on my desk, a reminder of why we do this work. Not for the recognition, not for the awards, not even for the difficult diagnoses, for the moments when we get to give someone back their life. I learned something that day when Dr. Collins mocked my diagnosis in front of everyone. I learned that being right sometimes costs you everything before it gives you anything. But I also learned that the truth always finds its way. Not always immediately, not always dramatically, but eventually always. In medicine, as in life, it's not who speaks loudest that's correct. It's who listens closest, acts bravely, and stands firm even when ridiculed. Because in the end, the truth doesn't need you to defend it loudly. It just needs you to pursue it quietly. And when you do, everything else falls into place. Mrs. Chun was right. I didn't give up on her son. But really, I didn't give up on myself. On the physician I wanted to become. On the standards I refused to lower. On the voice that said, something's wrong here, even when everyone else said I was wrong. That voice saved Michael Chen's life. And it saved my career. It saved a hospital from a $44 million mistake. Because the moment you stop trusting that voice, the moment you let ego or fear or conformity silence your clinical judgment, is the moment you stop being the doctor your patients need. So I choose to listen. Always. Even when it costs me. Especially when it costs me. Because some things are worth the price. And knowing you did right by your patient, that's priceless.